Is Jamison with On-Site Performance. He will be talking about the thermal envelope of the home and what we can do and what we should be looking for and things of that nature. So whenever you are ready, the floor is all yours.
Whenever we want to go, we can go.
Thank you for speaking tonight.
Yeah, you bet. I always enjoy this one because at least I'm speaking to people that are like-minded, right? Sometimes you do this stuff at like home shows and stuff, and you're speaking to people that have zero idea. So I'm Jamison Knowlton. I work for On-Site Performance Testing. I see a lot of faces I've seen before here. So some of this is going to be, review for some of you guys. I did try to throw a few extra things in here, and since a lot of you guys have seen some of this before, I would like to just let you guys have free reign for questions, and if there's something you want to talk about, something specific, let them rip. So let's try to make as best use of this time as we can, as long as you got me here. So I'm not going to go through all this stuff. You guys can read that if you want to. If there's something on that list that you don't know what that is, feel free to ask. But I was just telling him that about 80% of our work scope is existing retrofit houses. We go in, we test existing houses, help the homeowners find solutions to the problems they're dealing with, or just make their houses more effective. The other 20% is a combination of new home consulting, working with builders and homeowners when they build new homes so that we can try to avoid all the problems that you see otherwise, whether it's building envelope stuff, heating stuff, water heating stuff, water and moisture treatment, that kind of thing. And then we also do duct testing. So I don't know how many of you guys realize that in 2016 they passed a code in the state of Wisconsin that any ductwork outside conditioned space mandatory pressure testing has to be pressure tested and sealed in construction. So if you come up on a house, ask the question, was this done? So this number at the bottom here is slightly outdated. We're creeping in on 7,500 houses now. So blower door testing. Who here hasn't seen a blower door test? Everybody familiar? Okay. Pulling air out of a building, in most cases. We do have the ability to pressurize a structure. We don't do that very often, but there are a couple rare occasions where we have to do that. The house that has vermiculite. Everybody knows what vermiculite is, I assume. We cannot depressurize a vermiculite home, but we can pressurize a vermiculite home, because now we're pushing air out of the structure instead of bringing air through that product and into the structure. So in those cases, we will pressurize.
What information do you get from the pressurizing it?
Same leakage numbers.
Yeah.
Yep. We just have to, so basically I just gotta flip my fan around, because it's always a one-to-one exchange. Whatever goes in must come out, or vice versa, depending on the direction. Because otherwise, your pressure would continually increase, right, or decrease depending on which direction you're pushing. If you're maintaining a constant pressure, one out equals one in. So when we depressurize a house, we know how much we're pulling out, but it's only pulling out what it has the ability to pull in. So the same thing can be true going the other direction.
So
Yeah.
because of the vermiculite, you're not pulling it in because you don't want those particles coming in.
Correct.
Right? What do you do about mold?
The only time I'll address or even say the M word on those projects is if I can physically see it and I know deep down that that's what it is, and I'll show you a couple pictures as we get into this. We treat that the same way. If I look in the attic and I go through the basement and I see that there's a significant mold presence, then I will pressurize or not blower door test at all in some cases.
Is there a reason why you wouldn't just always do it with pressurizing instead of?
It's a pain in the ass when it comes to thermal scanning. Because when you pressurize, you're now pushing everything out. So now to enable the thermal scan that, you have to go outside. And the problem with doing it from the outside is you got siding in the way, you got roof in the way, you got all those external things that impede your process. Where if you do it from the inside, the only thing that's in your way is a sheetrock. And usually you can temper that enough to see what you need to see. So, again, it's only, we only do that when we really don't have other choice. But I've been on several projects where I always, when I get to a house, I always walk through first. I always do just a quick, hey, show me around, let's get my head wrapped around the house a little bit. And if I see any of those potential contaminants, I have on occasion just said, no, we're not doing that. I'm not putting you at risk, you don't want me to put you at risk, so we're just not gonna do it. And then with some of the new programs that we work with now, we use some software that'll throw a rough calibration number at it based on energy savings and utility bills and all that kind of stuff. So it's not terribly accurate, but sometimes it's better to be a little off than create an unsafe environment. So blower door testing, ventilation testing, so bathroom fans, HRV systems, kitchen hoods, sometimes depending on how they're configured, allows us to test the actual output of a bathroom exhaust system. Because bathroom exhaust systems are super important. The tighter your building becomes, the more important the fans become, because that's your dehumidification tool in most cases. So again, I'm going to kind of blow through some of these because I know most of you guys have seen this stuff before. We use thermal imaging for all this stuff. That image on the left is a post and beam building that was wrapped in SIPS panels. Everybody know what a SIPS panel is? Structurally insulated panel. They're basically OSB 5 to 9 inches of expanded polystyrene, the old white, I always call it the styrofoam cup, with either another layer of OSB, or even you can get them with even drywall or zip sheeting on them now. But so the panels themselves are fine because they're super insulated, but they bumped them into some post and beam construction here and didn't take the time to actually seal anything. So how water tolerant is EPS foam and OSB? Neither one of those tolerate water at all. So that's
air.
a recipe for disaster.
That's
right there.
air water.
That's air you're seeing.
That's air.
So this is, now, you can kind of see it. I cut the picture off a little bit, but so this is lowest temperature found on the screen. It looks like it says 48. Highest temperature on the screen that given moment was 63.2. I can't really see what my indicator was, but as long as the external temperature was colder, that's what this is representing, and we were actually depressurizing, so we were sucking that cold air in through the penetrations and openings in the structure. So what did they have to do to this? They had to go up there and pull all the molding off around all that and inject foam or caulk into those seams to actually air seal things, not only for for air movement, but what travels with air? Water and heat. So because the air leakage itself probably wouldn't be an issue other than on the pocketbook, but the water is going to ruin the building. So duct blasting, has everybody seen, anybody ever dealt with duct blasting before and what that's for? This is to determine leakage in a duct system of a building. So there's a couple different ways we have to do it. In new construction, if the furnace is not in place and we consider the ducting in a rough-in stage, we can just seal off the ducting and pressurize the ducting and measure the leakage. If the whole system's in place, we actually have to, it's another time we would actually pressurize the structure, because the ducts are an extension of the building at that point. So we pressurize the structure and then we can figure out how much the ducts are leaking by then pressurizing the duct system to get it to balance out to zero. So depending on when the contractor actually calls us, we prefer to go in there at rough-in stage, but sometimes they forget to call us and then we get to do it at the end, which requires not only a duct blaster but a blower door at the same time, so it gets a little more complicated. This is going to be a much more prominent piece of equipment if the new codes pass in the state. Rumor has it that they are discussing going to either 2018's or 2021 energy codes in the state of Wisconsin in the next 18 months. They're in discussion from what I understand. And then we do combustion safety testing. So what that generally applies to is chimney vented appliances. We also will test carbon monoxide output on condensing systems. Does anybody know why that system's a potential problem? I'm sure you guys have all seen them. It's an old oil burner with a backflow damper going up a chimney. So let's say this customer had this furnace in there and they loved it and it was producing all kinds of heat, which is what they do. But then they decide to air seal and insulate their house and put in a new 600 CFM kitchen exhaust hood. You think that furnace is gonna have a problem? It's gonna backdraft that sucker right into the building, and those old oil furnaces put off a pretty nasty amount of carbon monoxide. So these are the types of things we check when we're out on site to make sure that there aren't any problems with those systems that are gonna create bigger problems for the homeowners. So we test those things. New construction, we get involved with new construction, helping builders and homeowners work their way through that complicated process to eliminate any potential issues throughout that build. I left all this stuff in here just so I could touch on it briefly with you guys. There are a multitude of different programs in the state of Wisconsin right now as far as energy rebates or incentives for customers and homeowners. Everybody's probably familiar with Focus on Energy. That one's been around since 2001, I believe. And then about, it would have been August of 24, the Inflation Reduction Act was rolled out in the state of Wisconsin. That money is still here and still being used in the state of Wisconsin. So there are opportunities for your homeowners to go through these programs and get a bunch of money to help them work through. And this isn't just insulation stuff, this is heating systems, water heating systems, all kinds of different stuff. So again, I'm not gonna spend a bunch of time on this unless you guys have particular questions about it. This just kind of goes through the process. The one big thing about the Inflation Reduction Act is it's an income qualification. There's 3 different tiers, and I'll hit that in a second. There's money available for everybody. It just, depending on where your income lands, kind of dictates what you're going to be eligible for. And everyone requires an energy test, and then they have to work within the network of contractors to get any of that money. So here are the 3 income brackets. Now, I'm not going to get too crazy with this thing, but there's less than 80% AMI. AMI is area median income. Essentially, it's county, based on your county. Between 80 and 150, and then greater than 150. So again, as you see there, depending on where you fall on the income scale, we'll ignore this part for now. That kind of dictates where your costs are going to be. This is projected energy savings, and that's all done through the software that the DOE provided for us. And that can get pretty crazy. So that number, the energy savings numbers are projected by the software, and so when we go out and do an assessment, we have to do basically a full data collection on that structure. I mean, right down to appliances. And then we have to collect all utility information for 12 months from those homeowners, and then we have to take all that information and put it into the software, so the software can align all those values and make sure that everything is entered as it should be. And then we get to say, okay, well, we're going to change A, B, and C, and based on those changes, it'll project an energy savings score, and then that again dictates where incentives fall. So. IRA registered contractors. I tell my homeowners, think about the medical industry, and you gotta go to your in-network things. Same thing. Again, it's government programs. So, energy assessments are required for all that stuff. Combustion safety testing, ventilation equipment, thermal scanning. We went over a lot of that. This is modeling software. Here's a couple cool things that this new modeling software does do. It'll tell you your total fuel energy usage, electrical, fuel, CO production, if you're into that. But here's your total energy savings. And then I just grabbed a random house, but this house was going to see a 35% energy savings. here's where it gets interesting from my perspective. So based on the workload they were doing, down here's your heating loads and cooling loads. Look, so this is pre, this is post. So by doing the insulation work, they've actually lowered their heating load requirements for that particular structure and their cooling load requirements. How many of you guys have walked into a house and you're like, oh, this 1,200 square foot ranch has a 100,000 BTU furnace sitting in the basement? That's terrible. Terrible. So when we do these things, we can actually say, even based on your house in its current state, we can tell them exactly what their projected heating load is, and then they get to call their HVAC guy and say, what the hell did you put in my house? Because it's going to short cycle, or they put a 4-ton air conditioner in there and the load's only 12,000 BTUs, right? So this is a really useful screen. It's one of the reports that this thing generates. You know, most homeowners don't know any of that information, but for people in the know, it's super useful. So, and this was the work scope that was happening. I think this is the same building. They were doing air sealing and increasing their ventilation, and usually that's a new bathroom fan. They were obviously doing probably an attic rework with the air sealing in attic, probably box hills in the basement, then they must have been dense packing the exterior walls of the structure. So, then this kind of just goes through the process. You determine your work with your primary contractor, have your work completed by your contractor. How many attics do you think this guy is actually insulating on a daily basis? I mean, his button-up shirt and his brand new khakis that don't have a speck of dirt on them. Nice marketing there. They're gonna look a lot more like the guy on the right, if they remember to wear the respirator. Most of them young boys ain't doing that. And this just talks about the different processes through that program. We're going to get into a bunch of this stuff. The quality insulation side of that is every project gets QC'd in that program, and the Focus on Energy program. So not only do we QC the projects we work on, the program actually QCs every single project in the IRA program as well. And then they got multifamily stuff. This is the heater side of it. This is your heat pump water heaters, your heat pumps, your clothes dryers. There's even some money in here for, and I'm sure you guys see this opportunity a lot, your load service or your panels. You know, you walk into some of these old farmhouses and they still got fuse boxes in them, right? Or 100 amp services. There's up to $4,000 to have a 200 amp service installed. And then there's some additional wiring here. And this usually comes into play if there's a safety issue, you know, an old fuse box or knob 2 wiring falls under that one too. So there is some opportunities on that side of the scale for that. That's just eligible equipment, heat pumps, blah, blah, blah. You all know what those are, right? You guys been seeing some of those popping up out there?
I have a question about those.
Sure.
Just thinking about it in my head, I'm thinking, so it's pulling the heat out of the air, putting it in the water, right? Essentially. So I can see how that'd be awesome in the summertime, but in the wintertime, aren't you just taking the heat that you paid, the air that you paid to heat?
Yep, and I got a slide in here later, but we can touch on it. I just say you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul, right? So what the industry has done is in these little control panels now, they've given you the ability to turn the heat pump mode off in the wintertime. So in the wintertime, they're just standard electric systems. So, and we'll touch on those a little bit more with some pros and cons as we get a little deeper into this. But
And that's typically what I kind of tell people is that I would switch it to an all electric.
Absolutely.
And that totally makes sense, right?
How many of them do you think?
Idiot here?
How many of them do you think will actually do it?
No.
Right, but yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I'm not wrong in saying that.
One thing you guys should watch out for, and again, I'll touch on this again as we get a little deeper. These systems require a 15-foot radius around them. You can't shove these in closets because they rely on the temperature of the air. So imagine shoving that thing in a closet and it's cooling that closet and cooling that closet and cooling that closet. Pretty soon there's no heat for it anymore.
So, but could you store your meat in there then?
You
Oh,
probably
good,
could, yeah.
Yeah.
So, little side story, I got a builder up in Minocqua. He bought an old house, completely remodeled it, and it was one of the old 80 split levels. Walk in, go up and down. He put one of these in, and he put it on in a utility room that was like 10 by 10, and then that utility room happened to be open to the basement, and he was allowing that thing to cool that area. All that cold air was dropping down into this little storage room in his basement, so he put a return duct from his furnace in there, and that was his air conditioning. He didn't turn his air conditioner on one time all summer, because he had 4 kids and the thing was running all the frickin' time. But he said it would cool that utility room so much, and then it would drop, all that cold air would drop down into that basement, and he'd just have his furnace grab it and suck it and throw it around the house. He said, now, this is a insulation contractor, and this house was about as tight as you could possibly get it, so he didn't need much. But,
So without doing something crazy shit like that,
yeah,
can one of these reduce your cooling costs in the
Absolutely.
summer?
yeah,
Huh.
yeah. And again, we'll get into that a little bit more. They're also amazing dehumidifiers. Appliances. Next, we'll go back to one real quick. Anybody seeing, and this is, I don't think that's truly a heat pump dryer. Is anybody seeing the all-in-one units?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty cool.
More shit to break and go around.
Well, that's today's world. They're all gonna break. You know, washers and dryers last 4 years now, and they're twice as expensive as they used to be. So I'll just give you a firsthand example. So my daughter lives in Atlanta, and she bought this 2-story house, and she wanted to put a laundry room on the 2nd floor of that house in an internal wall, in an internal closet. And she didn't want to have to get an exhaust pipe out. Put one of these in there, problem solved. All you gotta have is condensate drain, because they don't exhaust.
They don't exhaust.
They're heat pumps.
Oh, wow.
There's no exhaust on them. And it's an all-in-one. You put your clothes in there, it washes them, and then it dries them, and then it tells you they're done. Takes about hour 45. So, I would say one of the downsides to them is capacity. You can't overload them. Here's those electrical panel upgrades I talked about briefly. And this is the Focus on Energy website. For those of you that have never been, there's all kinds of information on that website. Even stuff like, is it on here? They have a marketplace now where you can go buy appliances, you can buy, every so often they do deals on like Wi-Fi thermostats, where you can get these $150 thermostats for $25 or $50, depending on what their sale is. So it's a good spot to take a look at. They'll also send you free light bulbs. If you just, as long as you're your utility company is a Focus on Energy participating utility, you can get free light bulbs and shower heads and that kind of stuff. This one is slightly outdated because January 1st they upgraded this, but these are just some of the Focus on Energy incentive categories and dollar figures that are available. So Focus actually went to a 3-tier instead of this 2-tier system to more align with the IRA program. And actually the middle tier actually is the one that bumped up the most. Most people are getting somewhere in range $15 to $2,000 with a traditional attic rework project. Heating and cooling incentives, again, this is just an example of the things that are out there. And this is all through Focus again, depending on what type of system you're putting in. And these are constantly changing, so I would just encourage you to check out their website when you can. And then you got your local cooperatives. Anybody in here on a local cooperative, like Eau Claire Energy Cooperative? Eau Claire Energy Cooperative not only offers, well actually all of them now offer a $200 incentive for having your audit done. So they'll pay for $200 of your audit costs, and then they'll also offer up to $500 on the back end for doing any insulation work. And that's all in addition to or combined with any of the other programs. So the cooperatives are actually doing a pretty nice job nowadays, keeping up with a lot of that stuff. And some of them, if you're looking at doing like a heat pump situation, some of them offer some pretty big incentives, and they do it based on sizing. So like if you put in a 3-ton heat pump system, a lot of them are gonna offer $200, $250 per ton. But I've seen some of them across the state that are as much as $900 a ton, which can handle a lot of your operating costs. So program stuff, I didn't want to spend a ton of time on this, but anybody have any questions regarding that? Okay, if you do, you can always reach out. So we'll get into the building science stuff. And again, some of this, I know a lot of you guys understand this stuff. This is an example of stack effect and how the pressure in a building works during your typical heating season. Red arrows are exhaust, blue arrows are intake, and the taller the building determines where your intake stops and your exhaust starts. So if this was a 2-story building or a 3-story building, that pressure scale changes as you move up and down that structure. But what goes out must come in. So the leakier your attic is, the more your building is going to compensate for that by pulling cold air in wherever the heck it can. The bottom of your house is always your lowest pressure point in your building. The top of your house is like Dave from our office, he talks about your house is nothing but a hot air balloon that's too heavy to get off the ground. So the pressures are upward and outward. So the objective is to try to seal up as much of that as you can, and then, and only then, do you worry about the actual physical insulation or R value piece of it. And we'll get into some insulation stuff here too. But this one I'm sure you guys deal with, or at least see the aftermath of when you're doing home inspections. You know, how many times you guys go through and look at the bottoms of the windows, especially on wood windows like this one, and that's all black or the stain's all gone. It's not a window problem 90% of the time. I mean, you got your rare occasions where somebody left a frickin' casement window cranked open when it rained and it caused a problem. But most of the time, this is an internal humidity issue. This is a big one. Window coverings make it worse. You see all these companies out there now that love to sell those pull-down honeycomb accordion shades. We call them window wreckers, because they actually have thermal capability and they will keep a little bit more heat in your building, but at the same exact time they are going to create dew point issues on the back side of that window and will absolutely destroy your windows. There's only so many pieces of the pie that you have any control over as a homeowner. At the bottom statement there is circulation and temperature are good, because those are two things that you have control over. Okay? So what do we do when it's 25 below zero outside? We can't possibly drop our humidity so low to prevent window condensation. What other options do we have to try to at least fend it off? You know, at 25 below, you'd have to be at 5% humidity to prevent condensation. Increase your circulation, so keep your shades up, turn your ceiling fans on, maybe even run your furnace fan. You can also help control the surface temperature of your windows by raising the temperature of your building. Remember, dew point is what we're fighting. And we can also lower our humidity to a point. So what I typically do at my house when we get into those nasty scenarios, and actually I do it pretty much whenever we're below zero, I will make sure my shades are open, I will run my ceiling fans continuously in the upward direction, and I will bump the thermostat in my house 3 degrees. It allows me to get away with a little bit more humidity without creating those problems. Control what you can control, understand the rest of it, right? Why it's happening. Everybody know why that's happening? Everybody's good with that? We all see these. They're never maintained. They're always set way too high. And these not only wreck windows, they will wreck roofs, which we'll see in a second here. Everybody knows what one of those is, right?
I tell every customer to just turn it off and forget it exists.
Yeah.
Perfect answer. Are they gonna listen?
No.
Hey, at least you said your piece, right? Broken window seals. Everybody's seen those. Do you know why that why that is doing what it's doing? Why is that moisture forming in the middle?
Flexing towards each other.
Yes, but only in one direction. Heat always travels warm to cold. So in the wintertime, when you see this, what that's happening is that glass pane on the inside is concaving and flexing to try to touch the outside pane. Now, this is a pretty big picture window, so that glass has a lot of flexibility to it. Have you guys ever shown up on a job site and you see a window like this big and either the inside or outside pane is shattered? That's because the seal was shot and it didn't have enough flexibility based on the operating temperatures that were happening internal and external, and that glass finally got to its literal breaking point and shatters internally. I've seen it go both directions. Happens in the winter, obviously, on the inside pane, but I've seen the outside panes do the same thing when people are air conditioning to frickin' 63 degrees in the summertime on a 95-degree day. You can do the same, have the same impact, just in the opposite direction. This is kind of a guideline, and this information's out there. You guys can find this wherever. There's also this version where you can actually calculate it out. And in air temperature, the one thing they don't have in here is the window, because the window is the other piece of the equation. You know, a single pane piece of glass is going to condense quicker than a double pane, quicker than a triple pane. But you can get these charts out there too. So you can actually say, okay, geez, it's going to be 20 degrees today, and my humidity in my house is 4%. So you can be proactive. Oh, start getting my humidity down because I know it's going to get cold outside. Just gives you a good ballpark idea. If I go back to this other one, for most people, this is a pretty safe zone right here. 30 to 35%. How much of our time do we spend below zero? Very, very small. So we adjust accordingly from those points. 30 to 35% is a pretty safe zone. And those temperatures are based on lows, not highs. Right? Do you know what the medical industry tells you? This is as low as they ever want you to go, and they want you to go all the way to 60%. If you do that in the state of Wisconsin in our winter, you are going to have problems. And I tell, and it's always young moms, oh, my doctor said 55%, I gotta keep it at 55%. I said, what's worse, a little dry air or that? Because that's the alternative. So this was a corner where there was a dresser jammed in the corner, so there was literally no airflow. This was a slightly old, I think this was a 90s house, you can kind of tell by the trim. Corner wasn't done right. Had a little bit of air intrusion maybe, but more importantly, no airflow, no movement. Stagnant air is going to cool a lot faster, and it's going to hold its moisture in one location a lot faster. You can keep the air moving, you can prevent some of this stuff. This one, can't tell you how many times I've walked into a little kid's room, there's a stack of stuffed animals against the wall, and you stick your hand behind it and it's dripping wet. Because what does every young mom do? They stick a frickin' vaporizer in that kid's room because they coughed once, and now they saturate that space, and now the back of all those stuffed animals, which you know they're gonna shove in their mouth because that's what they do, are likely covered in mold. And they don't like to listen. You guys have all seen this, I bet, or a variation of this. Anybody hasn't seen one of these?
That's just where it dumps exhaust for the dryer hose.
Yep. Is that a good idea? At least they got the pantyhose on there to catch the wind, right?
Why waste all that heat?
And my house was dry, so I needed all that. Yeah, that's a no-no. And then, how about if they're doing it in that situation? What else does a gas dryer produce? Carbon monoxide.
Also, the plastic tube is nice.
Right, and that's another thing. Yeah, good catch. Plastic does not belong on anything that gets hot. So how many of the houses you go out that are vinyl sided have vinyl 3-flapper discharge points for a gas dryer? It's gonna warp those things in about 6 months, and that thing ain't gonna stay shut, and if it's hot, it needs to be metal. Plain and simple. Don't overcomplicate it. There we go again, that's a really good one. Tall lady lived at that house, I guess. We're getting into a little bit of combustion safety here. You guys have all seen these atmospherically vented water heater, and then somebody told them that if you insulate around your pipes, you'll save a bunch of energy.
Oh, yeah.
Or you could melt them and start your house on fire.
What is the insulation? I can't.
It's basically, you know, just the
Looks like
styrofoam
blankets.
pipe wrap.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
From here, it looks like blankets.
Oh, that over here is, that's all,
No,
somebody hanging their laundry probably.
it looks like somebody just wrapped a blanket and zip tied it.
Here's a close-up of that.
Wow.
Now, the other thing that was going on with this one is this water heater was backdrafting. First thing I do when I walk into basements and I see that pipe wrap on there, take it off and throw it on the floor. Say, doesn't belong there, safety hazard for sure, or I'll hand it right to the homeowner and say, throw this away. And once you bring it to their attention, they're usually pretty, oh, holy shit, you know? But, everybody understand backdrafting and how that happens? And what it is?
Explain it. Good.
Okay.
For the video.
So, I wish I had a better picture. So, one of the things that, and this should be maybe something you guys watch for too, and I don't know what your rules are. Does everybody understand why water heaters have a 3-inch chimney? Or what, better question, what determines the size of a chimney? Hmm? Yeah. How much heat is actually going up that chimney? If a chimney gets too big, and you see this a lot when the chimney used to supply the furnace and the water heater, and they left the old 6 or 8 inch pipe going up. Well, now the furnace has been changed out to a new condensing system, so that's not using it at all. So now you get this orphaned water heater that's now 3 inches, maybe 38,000 BTUs, dumping into a 6-inch pipe, and you see, look like water was running down the outside of the pipe. It's not drying that chimney properly, and it's also not drafting well. Chimneys have to be sized based on the BTU output of the appliance going into them. And that also applies to old wood burner fireplaces and things too. As these systems get more and more and more efficient, there's less heat going into those chimneys. How many times have you guys opened an attic hatch and the brick chimney's coming up next to the hatch and there's freaking clay shavings all around the base of that chimney? It's because they now only have a water heater venting into a freaking 8-inch clay chimney pipe, and all the moisture is drying externally through the brick, and it's deteriorating the brick because it's not drying properly. So back to backdrafting for a second. So if your pipe is the wrong size, you're not going to get good upward draw, especially in a single-story home. The taller the building, the more draw you'll get, the stack effect does its thing. But here's where we typically run into problems, and this is why we don't install these in new construction anymore. Mechanical ventilation. Bathroom fans, kitchen fans, dryers, HRV systems, unless they're ventilated properly. Mechanical ventilation will always, always, always win. This is natural, this is just pressure. But if we go over to the other side of the house and we turn a fan on that's pushing kitchen exhaust 600 CFM, that thing don't stand a chance. You're always going to take the least path of resistance. That's a pretty easy path. And now, not only is the heat not going up the chimney, either is the moisture that's produced during that combustion cycle, or the carbon monoxide and other gases that are emitted through that combustion cycle. And if they were smart enough to put foam around them, I mean, that was liquid. It got so hot. It literally was dripping. And then, you ever walk into them and you see the little plastic caps? and they're completely melted, that thing has backdrafted. This is a solution to that problem. Got an inducer motor, just like your furnace does. Right? Now, some people don't like these because they're noisy, but I guess I'd rather have a little hum in my basement than gas in my basement. So,
Can you convert? You can't just convert.
years ago, you used to be able to buy conversion kits, but my recollection of that, there was a point probably 10 years ago where the retrofit kits were more than the water heater. So everybody just started just replacing their water heater.
I've on 2 occasions seen people remove a power vent water heater, put in a natural draft, and connect it to the PVC pipe.
Ooh. Yeah, that's a bad idea.
Of course, goes horizontal across the basement.
Well, not only
And it
that,
melts, and
not only that, the power vents are more efficient, which allows them to use PVC, because that's all based on heat production again. That's a terrible idea.
yep, PVC's turning black.
I had one time that was a chimney vent, went up and into an old chimney, and on the other side of the chimney, the dryer went up and into the chimney. Every time they turned the dryer on, they were basically blowing out the water heater. Electric standard water heaters. The most expensive way to heat water, but pretty bulletproof for the most part. When I look at water heaters and people talk to me about water heaters, the first question I ask them is how many people live in this house and how much activity is that thing going to see? This is fine for a single person, a couple, maybe a couple with one small child. These suck when it comes to back-to-back-to-back showers. They recover horrendously. Okay? Natural gas is the cheapest and the fastest if the house is applicable to natural gas.
So in anybody's normal house that doesn't have 40 inches of insulation in the attic,
Yeah, which most of them do.
if you were to pick between one of these hybrid electrics or like an on-demand gas, which one's gonna cost less to run?
Okay, so we'll talk on-demand gas for a second. Anybody tell me how much BTU capacity an on-demand gas water heater uses?
Upwards of 200,000.
200,000. So I always say, okay, so we got, every time that thing turns on, we're turning 3 furnaces on. Right? So if they're not on very much, they're pretty effective and pretty efficient. But now let's say you put that on-demand water heater in a house that has 6 kids and 4 of them are high school athletes and their frickin' washing machine never shuts off and the shower never shuts off. Is that really an efficient water heater? It has to heat that water so quickly, it uses a crap ton of BTU to do that. So for those types of situations, I would steer away from it. Now, cabins, limited use facilities are great for tankless, because when they're off, they're off. Or again, in the small family scenario, they can be very effective. Now the downside of them is there's usually that cold plug of water that you gotta wait frickin' 3 or 4 minutes, and depending on where your bathroom is in conjunction to that water tank, because it does not light until it recognizes flow. So it doesn't do anything until that spigot opens, and depending on your distance and volume and all that kind of stuff. So I always feel when we talk about systems like this, and this applies to heating systems too, they all have their place, but they all don't belong everywhere, right? Depending on the family size, depending on the habits of the home, depending on what is going to be going on in that structure, that's going to dictate to me what system we should be looking at. Now, to go from this one to the one we were touching on earlier, these are your heat pump water heaters. So, efficiency-wise, a lot of them now are around that 385%. Because again, they're taking ambient air, compressing it, moving it through. They serve as a dehumidifier. So now we've already eliminated another product out of that person's basement. And you said in the summertime, awesome. They're taking all that heat, they're actually cooling a 15-foot radius between 10 and 15 degrees with average use. And of course, the more it's used, the more it cools. Robs from Peter to pay Paul during the heating season. That's a con, in my opinion. That's why the industry, so when these first hit the market, they were heat pump only. Over the last 5 to 7 years, they've actually started to add those modes. And they have to have ample space to operate, because you will create a literal walk-in cooler if you put that thing in too small of a space. And when there isn't ample heat for that to draw from, you're affecting its efficiency to do its job. So at that point, you might as well just turn the dang thing into a traditional water heater. Now, my dad has one of these in his garage in Florida. All day, every day, couldn't be better. Cools his garage down. There's so much freaking heat down there, it don't matter. Fantastic application. We don't live in Florida, so.
Do those have any kind of sensor in them to where it's realizing the temperature is getting too cold and it automatically switches?
Some of them do, and then some of them now, you can't see it in this image, but there are applications now where you can duct these to the outside, on the intake and the exhaust side. Depending, and then they'll put shutoffs on them depending on the season, right? You can open it to the building or not open it to the building, and so it's a progressing industry for sure. But these are, so what I've been seeing recently is these are $4,500 water heaters. So you gotta keep that into account too.
Just as anybody will look on Menard's website, 1,500 to 2,000.
And then you gotta install it.
Yeah.
That's where usually the added cost comes in. And I would say, well, Menard sells Rheem, and theirs are pretty decent. But I mean, you go to like Borge Gala, I think is the last one I saw, and they were like $4,600 to install a heat pump water heater in a basement. So,
What's the lifespan of those, 6 years? 8?
I think they come with 10-year warranties. However, the lifespan of any of that stuff is dependent on the person that's not maintaining it or maintaining it. How many of you guys drain your water heater every year? One. Wow. One more than I thought I'd get.
Nerd.
You know, we're all supposed to do that 3 to 5 gallons every spring for the life of your water heater. Now, if you have a water heater you have not touched in 10 years, do not open that valve. You will not be happy with your outcome on that.
I've heard it sounds like a basketball just clunking around in there.
So that's a gas water heater. And basically what you're doing is you're heating up all the clay sediment that's sitting in the bottom of that thing. And in those cases, because the gas ones heat from the bottom, if there's 6 inches of dirt in the bottom of that thing, it takes time for that heat to get all the way through that dirt before it even starts heating the water, which is why you're supposed to drain them, but nobody ever does.
I actually took that valve out, that drain valve,
Yeah.
that comes, because it's not a full-size 3/4 inch valve.
No.
And I put a full 3/4 inch valve on there. So when you open it and drain it drains fast.
Oh, yeah.
You can get a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah. You guys ever see these? Maybe. These you're generally gonna see, so for those of you that don't know what they are, they're circulation pumps. And they're generally set up in houses where you've got a second-story master bath on the opposite corner of the building. And they don't wanna wait for water. What most people don't realize is that right here is a timer. So you can actually set that thing up to run between 5 and 7 a.m. and then shut back off again. If these things run 24 hours a day, you're basically taking care of part of the heating load of your building by doing that with the least efficient piece of equipment in your building. I've seen these in excess of $100 a month on an electric water heater with long runs. If you see them, either have the conversation and teach them how to use them, or unplug them. Alternative heating things, and I threw this one in today because I was curious how much of this stuff you guys are seeing or not seeing. Everybody, I'm sure if you've been doing this for any period of time, you know what these ETS systems are. Anybody that doesn't? So ETS stands for electric thermal storage. That's the one in the upper right-hand corner. Those were super popular in the early 80s, when all electric homes were popular. That was also a time when they were doing a lot of on-peak, off-peak heating. So basically, there's a pile of bricks inside that thing. And what they would do is at night, when the electricity was cheap, it would not only heat the house, but it would heat the bricks. And then during the day, when the electricity got expensive again, it would basically just run a fan that would blow the heat off those bricks to maintain temperature in the building until the electric got cheap again. They're actually pretty effective units in the right situations. You're not seeing too many of them anymore. But the north end of town here in the Planets, I don't know if any of you guys get in here, that was a very electrified neighborhood at one point in its life, in the 70s there. So I've seen more of them in that neighborhood than probably anywhere else in the state. PTAC units. Anybody who's ever stayed in a hotel knows what a PTAC unit is. All these multifamily structures that are getting built freaking everywhere, PTAC units. They're basically electric resistant heat that go through the wall. So they are leakers. The air literally goes right through them. They do make a heat pump version of that, but usually by the time you switch that to a heat pump version, your costs get you to a point where you might as well put a freaking mini split in. But you see these a lot in those multifamily structures because they're cheap. And those builders like cheap. So, combo boilers. See these a lot with in-floor heat, and then they can also handle domestic. Pretty good. They have to be maintained. They have filters in them, and they have to be serviced every year for sure, if not even a little more frequently. But pretty good. This is one of the newer things you're going to start seeing in the market. Air to water heat pumps. So you guys probably you all know geothermal, right? So that's typically either water to water, which would be geothermal to in-floor heating, or water to air, which would be geothermal to forced air heating. This is the backwards version. So this is actually an air source heat pump that can heat water for an in-floor heat system. So the technology is getting better all the time. When you get into these inverted, the slim, long, inverted compressor units, 20 below zero is pretty obtainable for most of those. Mini splits are talking minus 31 now for 75% capacities. So, and it's pretty similar outdoor units, it's just that now there's a conversion from air to liquid. So you're gonna start seeing these. They're getting to be a lot more popular. And I'm sure by now everybody's seen the ductless mini splits. Yeah.
In those ones, I'm seeing a lot of mold in the inside of the unit.
Yeah, if they're not keeping them clean.
People don't know that.
Maintain
Yeah.
them. Yeah. Yeah. Also see a lot of issues with those where when they mount them, they drill the holes through the wall and don't do anything with them. Just drill the holes, walk away. But as far as function is concerned, I mean, that's about the most efficient air conditioning system you can put in the house. We're talking 22, 23 SEER on a lot of those now. Compared to your traditional systems are 13, 14 on average nowadays. Compared to so this is your traditional air source heat pump down here, your ducted version, even most of those are gonna be 15 to 17 SEER. And those are gonna tap out usually around zero in today's world. So, mini splits are getting really, really popular, specifically in slab houses, because you don't gotta run any ducting. And you can put a head in each space and keep each space a different temperature. They dehumidify, they actually have a really cool dehumidification mode that you can put them in, where they alter the temperature in the room less than 1 degree, but still pull moisture out of the air. They run at such a slow cycle. So some pretty cool things out there. Everybody know what HRVs, ERVs are and how they work? Do we want to waste any time on those? Does anybody not know what they are or how they work?
What's the difference?
Okay. Look at the back. What's the difference? I'm gonna ask you guys. Does anybody know what the difference is? One belongs in this climate and one doesn't. Do we know what they stand for? Yep. One has the ability to dehumidify and the other one does not. And that's important in our climate. HRVs do not have the ability to control any water. ERVs do, to a point. The scenario I typically run into when I walk into a building with these things, the thing's set on high, it's been on for 12 years, they never maintained it, they never touched it, and they're complaining about their energy bills. Can anybody tell me what the approximate recovery efficiency of one of these is? It's around 70%. They vary, but on average, around 70%. So if they've got a 70% recovery rate, that means they have a 30% loss rate. So if that thing's on high and running all day, every day, am I not just pumping 30% of my heat out the side of my building mechanically all day long? So what if I combine that with a heat pump of any kind? So let me back up. Who can tell me what the biggest problem with heat pumps are? Lack of capacity. Heat pumps are designed to maintain temperature really well. They suck at changing temperature because they don't have that 80,000 BTUs of propane to throw at it, right? Most of them are going to be between 36 and 48,000 BTUs on the high end. So if I'm pumping 30% of my heat out the side of the building and my system is already a little bit undersized because I'm trying to get away and save some energy, I can't tell you how many times I've been on geothermal projects where their energy bills are $800 a month, but that thing's been running for 12 years. Shut it off, all of a sudden the geothermal can take a breath and catch up, and then it can do its job. Should these ever be run in the summer? What do we in the summertime? What are we trying to get rid of? Heat and water, right? What's that going to bring in the summertime? Heat and water. These are 3-season tools. They should only be used in those 3 seasons, never in the summertime. Everybody talks about, oh, I need all the fresh air. Yeah, to some extent it'll do that, but there's always a trade-off. You're getting a little bit of fresh air, but you're trading that for operating costs, right? And how often do you think these actually get maintained? You guys ever open these?
All the time, always full of junk.
Have you had snakes come out of them yet?
No snakes.
I've had that. We actually did a big project for one of the Native American tribes down by Black River, and their exit ports were right near the ground, and the screens and flaps were gone, and that thing was full of snakes. It was a little surprise when you open the door. But these all have filters, and they all look like this. So are they really getting fresh air? To be determined, I think. And how many of you guys check the outside ports on them?
There's bees in there.
A lot of times there's bees in them, because these holes, in some cases, are big enough to let bees in them. And you can ask a homeowner, when was the last time you cleaned that? They're like, what's that? We had no idea. Didn't even know it was there, much less what it was for. So if you're not going to maintain something like that, and you're not going to run it right, don't frickin' put it in, because you're just going to create more problems and more trouble with your house for doing it. Do you guys check furnace filters? How many times have they caved in and fallen in the furnace? Haven't been changed in 7 years.
Arrows backwards.
Yeah, arrows are backwards. Yeah, but then you can just flip it around and it's good again, right?
Yeah.
I looked at one recently. I sent the picture to Jen. It was like a full dog. the filter.
Oh, you should see AC coils when that happens. I had a friend that used to have an air conditioning company, and he sent me a picture where he pulled an inch of dog hair off the bottom of the AC coil above the furnace.
I had one where it was a treeless thing, 2 years old, went down there, it was caved in, and I asked the homeowner, like, when was the last time you changed your furnace filter? He looks me dead in the eyes, and he goes, I didn't know my furnace had a filter that had to be changed. So it probably still had the drywall dust on it from
Yep.
being built.
I've had homeowners not know where their furnace in their house is
Oh my gosh.
after living there 6 years.
It's a good thing there's people like that, otherwise we wouldn't have jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's truth to that, for sure.
Place in Menominee, I looked at, they had just this tiny little, you had a trap door on the floor to go down to the school crawl
Crawl
space.
space, yeah.
Furnace was like 5 years old, and I don't think the people that bought it even knew what was down there.
No.
The filter had never been changed since it was brand new.
And the crawl space is probably wet and damp and, yeah, been in them. So switching gears, now we're gonna start getting into insulation a little bit. This picture is also this picture. Everybody's seen box hills. The previous version is once I put my thermal camera on it and move a little bit more air. So you're just, fiberglass has zero ability to stop air, nothing but a filter. And in this picture, you can see that it's been filtering air for its total existence. So if this is in a basement in Wisconsin, what else do you see wrong with that image?
Vapor.
Vapor barrier below grade. I just had a customer.
But is that below grade? That's a wood frame wall. That might be.
Nope, no plastic below grade ever.
No, I'm saying, is that below grade?
Mhm.
So I see the wood frame wall, I mean, you could have.
Well, there's concrete behind
That
it.
could be a walkout basement. and that
In
could be-
theory, you're that could be. Well, if that's the case though, they better have drywall on here and create a pinch point so that that's actually functional vapor barrier at that point. I just had it was a daughter of one of the big ups at Excel Energy called us out, and she'd gotten a $17,000 bid from one of these basement companies to come in and install drain tile and do all this stuff to her basement. And I get down there and she's like, oh, there's mold behind the fiberglass. I said, yeah, because there's poly on the wall. She's like, what? I said, get rid of all the poly. She had some grading issues outside. I said, get your grading fixed, get rid of the poly, clean this all up, get a mold guy out here to treat it, and put it back together, keep the poly off there, and you'll be fine. She's like, oh, that cost me like $4,500. Didn't have to cut her floor apart, didn't have to do all this stuff.
But it's stuff that wouldn't affect.
Yep.
Mm.
Do you guys pull those out ever? Do you ever grab those and pull on them? You ever do it in the winter and they're frozen to the outside of the house?
There's suspicion of
Oh, looks a lot better on my screen. Eye joist, sill box, mold. Don't like to use that word because I don't test it to see exactly that's what it is, but I think we're all
mold-like substance.
mold-like stuff. There you go.
Possible microbial growth.
Yeah, yeah.
So now, usually you'll see how they kind of fix it, they cut out that pink foam and spray foam around it, and shove that in there. Is that not just trap all that moisture behind it still?
The moisture came from inside the building, so that would be a better scenario than the fiberglass. But the problem with the rigid foam is there's still an air gap. Air gaps are breeding grounds. So the wood, in theory, could still travel some moisture through the wood itself. This is a better option because the foam bonds directly to the wood, eliminates any air void. So now any capillary action that's going to take place is either going to take place in the wood itself or outside the wood. Okay? Nobody's going to say, what about the off-gassing? The internet's a wonderful place sometimes.
As long as you're not there puffing and trying to get hot.
Well, and as long as it's installed properly. This is a very nice application. When you see a lot of discoloration in foam, that's a bad chemical composition. They probably used a froth pack, they probably didn't monitor their temperatures, So they probably didn't get it installed properly, and those foams, in theory, could provide a little bit of off-gassing to the building. Most of the off-gassing occurs during application, especially with closed cell foam. Anybody know how to tell the difference between closed cell and open cell when you're on the job? Poke it with your finger. If your finger goes into it, it's open cell, and it should be noted.
Like great stuff, soft.
Well, even some of the great stuff has a little bit of rigidity to it, but true open cell foam, you can literally push your finger right through it with very little resistance. So what's the difference between closed cell and open cell from a performance standpoint? A little, but that's not where I was going.
Vapor barrier.
Vapor barrier. Open cell foam is a kitchen sponge. If it's hard to the touch, it's closed cell because it has closed its cells, so therefore it is now no longer air permeable or water permeable. Open cell foam will literally absorb the moisture to the surface. Seen many houses where they had to tear complete roof systems off of houses because they used open cell foam.
Why did they even make open cell foam? Where is its purpose?
It was cheaper, and there are some applications where open cell foam can fill large voids. And you can use open cell foam, but then you have to implement a vapor barrier in addition to that. And they can do that through, they make vapor barrier paints and other applications over the top of it. Because the problem with closed cell, you have to see the surface you're applying it to because it doesn't flow, doesn't move. And you can only apply it in like 3.5 inch lifts because it generates so much heat, and because it closes itself so quickly, it can actually start itself on fire. So open cell foams were good for, I guess the easy analogy would be cathedral ceilings where you got massive roof trusses. They could fill the whole thing. The mistake most of them made is they never put a vapor barrier on it, and the thing just became this massive sponge on the top of their house. But if you vapor barriered that, you did everything correctly, it can be a pretty effective R-value boundary.
So when the process I seen years ago, I built a fire station, concrete block walls, and they injected foam, and it holes in the bottom all the way to the top.
So depending
That's
on
probably close,
so
open
the
cell?
no, that would have probably been injectable foam. So years ago, there used to be a formaldehyde-based injectable foam, and if you guys ever come across that on a job site, you'll know it. If you touch it, it just disintegrates. It literally turns to powder. Its longevity didn't last. There are still some injectable foams on the market now for applications like that. The problem is I think they're all water-based. So you can only apply them in certain times of the year and certain applications, and
This would have been like early 2000s.
yeah, it was around that. Yeah, it's just I've seen it done on one of the nice applications for something like that is brick houses with lath and plaster internal, where there's no way to get to the cavity, so they would actually drill the mortar joints and use it, because injectable foams only require a 3/8 hole. They drill one at the bottom and one at the top of each cavity, and they stick it in there, and it's like shaving cream. But you got your temperatures have to be right, your humidity has to be right. It's a very tricky substance to play with. Another application I actually saw that applied in was it was a slab house that they put sleepers on, and then they put flooring on top of that, so there was an 1.5 inch gap between the concrete and the actual subfloor, and they injected foam underneath there to fill that void because they had cold air just freaking whipping underneath that thing. You don't see it very often, very seldom. Foundation walls. This is a thermal image several years ago from on the outside of a house in the wintertime. That's the concrete wall, and that's actually the poured stoop coming off the front of the house, just radiating heat because it was exposed on the inside of the structure. A little bit of snow on the edge. That's what the dark stuff is. Foundation walls. Anybody know the R value of concrete or block? Superconductive. Moves energy very rapidly. Foundation insulation is one of the bigger energy saving items you can do to your building. How many times you walk down into like those 1960s, 1970s ranch houses and the basement is completely unfinished and wrapped in concrete with nothing on it? So if you think about it, half of the surface area of that house has zero insulation on it. It's wrapped in a superconductive material, and all of those surfaces on the other side of that wall are lower than air temperature of the building. Right? So I'll switch to the next screen just so I can kind of show you. But so imagine for a second this foam board wasn't here. Most houses you're going to have about this much of that foundation that's exposed to external air temperature, right? The next 3 feet are frozen ground temperature, so 32-ish degrees. From that point down to here, what's ground temperature? 50-ish, 47 to 55 degrees, depending where you are, water content, soil, all that kind of stuff. All of those temperatures are lower than whatever you're trying to keep your house. So it's going to be stealing energy at different rates depending on the delta T or the difference in temperature. This is a great application. This product, and this just happens to be the Thermax brand, this product is completely fire code compliant in that application. It can be left exposed. The foil facing serves as the ignition barrier, so there is no code requirement for covering. It's a great opportunity for people to insulate their basements without spending all the money and all the framing and all the additional work. Because once you frame it, well, you might as well wire it. And
That's only given that there's no exposed foam, correct? Like,
Right.
there's no hole.
yeah, the edges have to be foil taped and stuff, but yes. And we're gonna assume in that image that happened, because it looks like to me like all the seams are taped. But yes.
So if
Also
you-
notice why it's not all the way to the floor?
They got a leaking system or something?
Yeah, it's just water prevention. So if the foundation did ever leak a little bit, it does give it a pack. Because day one when that foundation's poured, the grading's gonna be nice. Year 27, after all the settling and the composting of the front yard, everything changes direction, and all of a sudden you got water coming in. At least you're not putting the foam in jeopardy. You're still giving it an outlet.
I see most good builders today put a 2-inch foam on the outside of foundations.
It serves similar purpose. The only downside to doing it outside, you gotta protect it from the sun and everything else that's
Yeah.
outside. And how many times have you come back to those after the first winter and the coil stock they put over it is all buckled? Because the frost grabbed it.
So you're better
Don't have
off
to deal with
doing
that
the
in here.
Inside wall.
Hmm?
You're better off doing it on the inside.
My opinion.
Yeah.
From an R value standpoint, horse apiece.
Yeah.
I would much rather not have to deal with all the BS on the outside.
So as far as code compliance goes, like new construction stuff, if they put the 2-inch foam on the outside though, they're covered, they don't have to insulate the inside, correct?
So that's a
Correct.
it's a moving target though. Code officers use res check to meet other requirements. Res check allows you to rob from Peter to pay Paul as well. So let's say you didn't want to do much insulation, foundation insulation. Let's say your budget only allowed for R5. Well, you could upgrade your exterior walls and your attic insulation and put in a higher efficiency furnace and still meet your requirements based on red check, so you could still be code compliant. Res check is kind of a mess that way. It allows them to get away with things in some areas and go a little higher in other areas. You see a lot of that, they'll throw a 98% efficient furnace in and then do R40 in the attic. As long as they're meeting those numbers, that's all that matters. So, moisture, we kind of already touched on this. Foundation wall, there was batting in there, condensed. The number one reason you're gonna have moisture issues on your foundation is improper grading. Improper grading, improper grading, improper grading. All those 1950s houses that were graded once perfectly have had 70 years of lawn mowing going on, which is nothing but a compost bin. Those front yards, the sidewalks didn't settle. The yards got taller. And now all that water, instead of running away from the buildings, is now running to the buildings. Block walls are hollow. I've had a couple pretty unique opportunities over the years to where there was so much water pushing up against the foundation walls that I was literally witnessing water squirting out of the block walls. So there's a couple different ways you can correct some of that. Obviously grading and gutters and get your downspouts out and all that kind of stuff. And if you have drain tile, great. Some pumps, great. We had a couple situations where we actually went in, had the contractor go to the very bottom course of block, drill into the bottom course of block, install PVC pipe, run that PVC pipe to the sump bin. We told the water where to go, gave it a relief valve until they could get around to fixing all the mess that was on the outside of the building, which is where most of it came from in the first place. If you ever notice when you bump into these basement correction companies, and I'm not saying they're bad, they never touch the grading on the house. They always sell them more stuff.
They let the water come in and then they try
Yep.
and deal with it once it's
Yep.
in, rather than dealing with the situation.
They'd rather cut all the way around your foundation than create an absolute disaster in your house, put drain tile in, and do exactly that. I'm gonna catch the water after it already made it into your house. How about I just stop it in the first place?
Just get some of that drylock paint, it's fine.
Well, a lot of them, I think, a lot of them just do what the client says. They want them to put.
It's getting to be what I call a used car salesman industry. They're gonna come in and they're gonna high pressure sale all that stuff. I mean, you're seeing that in all the industries nowadays.
If you sign this today, we'll give you
Yep.
15% off.
Yep. Oh, let me go talk to my manager. Maybe I can get you a better deal. Yeah, it's all the same stuff. This is an exterior wall. No, I think this was a lookout wall. Vapor barrier it's right there. Just never made it all the way to there. And the internal moisture pushed through, condensed like crazy. And there's that substance you were talking about again. And that's OSB, so that's shot. You might as well get rid of that. Because OSB, when it gets wet, is,
Over it. It'll be fine.
yeah, it's basically paper mache. This is, batting got removed. This is ice. Poor R value, air movement. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this. I'm gonna say my piece on fiberglass batting. It belongs in one place and one place only, and that's an exterior wall that's completely encapsulated. Anywhere else that this stuff is shoved, it might as well be shoved in a dumpster, because that's about what it's good for.
Just double advocate type of thing.
Yep.
Wouldn't that work on interior walls for sound deadening?
Sure. The
It's not
downside.
gonna have any insulation.
It would, but the downside of it is it's a very toxic product. That stuff gets airborne, it's shards of glass. I'd much rather use like a rock wool material or even some of the new denim materials. The new denim insulation materials have amazing sound dampening qualities with no toxicity.
They still make that?
As far as I know, I haven't seen otherwise.
Most of the sound goes through the studs anyway, so you have to almost put a sound board over the
Well, depending, yeah. So you are seeing in some new construction now where they're double walling and offsetting on some of those, especially master bathroom to master bedroom stuff. This is a fine application as long as this foam board is adhered 100% to that surface. You don't want any floppy play in that because now there's that airspace again. Now you're creating that mold-friendly environment. So this is a lookout wall. Above grade, below grade, poly above, house wrap below. Do we have a problem with that? Is house wrap a vapor barrier? No, house wrap is vapor opening. So it will allow that assembly to dry. It's a weather resistant barrier, which means it's liquid closed, but vapor open. Crawl spaces, we all love crawl spaces. They made an attempt on that one. They kinda got some plastic in there. Wasted their time, because if you don't seal it, it's doing nothing. That's what a proper, with the exception of the box hills, they never, maybe we'll just assume they hadn't got to that part yet. That's a nice encapsulated crawl space. Nice, thick, durable product that can't get wrecked by somebody crawling on it. So what are the big concerns with crawl spaces from a indoor air quality perspective? What comes out of a crawl space? Yes, what else?
Radon.
Radon, what else?
Snakes. Cockroach.
Feces.
Termites.
Bugs, rodents, any other soil gases that might be in there? Maybe your neighbor's septic tank is crap and it's leakage seeping into your house, right? Put a gasket up. Don't let it in.
Do that,
Hmm?
you condition that, correct?
Yeah, conditioning, yep. Yep. So that's a good question. How do we determine whether we condition a crawl space or don't condition a crawl space? Or what determines the difference
Whether it's encapsulated.
in where the insulation barrier is? So if this thing was insulated here, insulated, sealed on the bottom, and that it had no access to the house, now we can vent that crawl space. Very, very seldom do I ever recommend that. There are rare occasions where that's probably the best situation. Actually, one of our insulators down in the La Crosse area, he lives on French Island, and it floods every spring. So for him to encapsulate his crawl space was not an option. So what he actually ended up doing, and this was a big house, but we actually furred this down about 6 inches and created a whole subsurface under there, and then made sure we vented the crawl space so that we created enough space to get the R value we wanted, to get the barriers we wanted. We applied rigid foam underneath there, sealed it all up, and we let the water run under the house.
Wouldn't spray foam be a different option?
It would be. The problem with his particular situation was his whole house was on a crawl space, so all his plumbing was in there, right? And and that's why we lowered everything. We had to get that boundary down below all the plumbing and heating and electrical BS, while still allowing the water to frickin' run under his house at will. So, every situation has its own solutions, but,
Sounds like a teardown.
$2 million addition is what it became.
Wow.
Yeah. We've all seen this. That's a DIY special. They didn't even bother to take the bags out of there. Anybody see anything else in that attic that's probably not a good idea? Think not insulation related.
Is that not too hot?
Well, that's what we're watching for, knob and tube. Yep. Knob and tube, and then the other thing we need to do is we need to lift a piece of that fiberglass up to make sure there isn't something even nastier underneath it. We'll get to that in a second. How about this one? I've seen more than one of these.
I've seen that multiple times.
Pretty effective?
I always just assumed like maybe these people worked at factories and this
That's
stuff
what it
was-
is.
They bought a lot of electronics.
No, they probably worked at a packing facility, and they went dumpster diving every day, but did they help themselves? Air just went right around all that crap, it ain't doing nothing.
Yeah, but it feels better about it.
You can say
Yeah,
that.
it made them feel warm and fuzzy. I already said my piece on fiberglass. So this is a different beast of fiberglass. So I'm gonna beat this up a little bit because I think it's important. So what you see on the right is what's highlighted in the yellow. This is a form from Owens Corning that I pulled out of an attic of a house. Read that right-hand side, especially the bottom paragraph. What do you take from that?
Doesn't work when it's needed the most.
Doesn't work when it's cold, and when you need it the most, it's crap. Most studies are showing 30 to 40% R value drop at 0.
So I wonder why it's still so popular.
Because it's cheap to buy,
It's clean.
and most of the contractors that install it get kickbacks from the manufacturers.
When did it become cheaper, like?
It's not actually,
Back in my construction days, if we go back 25 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I remember doing the calculations, and to get an let's say an R50 in every square foot,
Mm-hmm.
cellulose was cheaper to get an R50 than it was fiberglass to get an
Yeah.
R50. But it seems like now, I think it's the other way.
It's about a horse apiece nowadays. I think fiberglass is just a hair cheaper. And that had to do with the manufacturing process, and honestly, COVID had a big impact on that. Because during COVID, the cellulose manufacturers were having a hard time getting product, and they were actually changing the composition of their material, and we actually saw a lot of problems with cellulose during that window of time. It's corrected itself now, but I think the cost has gone up, so that's where things have gotten. But cellulose will maintain its R value regardless of temperature. It's a higher density product, there's less air in it, so you don't get that convective movement. Convection, cold air is dense, it's heavy, falls, works its way through. Would anybody argue with me that 1990s houses are some of the worst ones you see? I think they're the worst.
Just the ones Dave built.
I think it's the worst generation of houses built. They were built with cheap materials. OSB was thriving then. Most of the insulation contractors were coming in, they were blowing fiberglass everywhere, and they were actually doing what's called overblowing. They were inducing too much air into it to make it really fluffy, to make it look like there was a lot, but you were actually getting less material. And then the stuff just settled out like crazy, and then here's one of my other favorite things about fiberglass.
Yeah.
Mouse hole, mouse hole, mouse hole, mouse hole, mouse hole, mouse hole.
You guys can see that on, with the thermal cameras, right? All the little runways.
You can see the very next picture in my queue there. You guys have all seen this.
Is that looking up from below?
This is looking with a thermal at the ceiling of a house without a blower door running. The mice have literally moved all of that insulation.
That's a lot, they probably have a lot.
That's probably 20 years of mice, right? I have witnessed time and time again where someone will come in and they'll take the fiberglass out of the attic, they put cellulose in, but they leave the fiberglass around the skylight chase. The mice will run across the cellulose to live in the fiberglass. Very rarely will you ever see a mouse burrow through cellulose. The only time you will see it is if there's fiberglass underneath the cellulose. They'll go through it enough to get to where they want to go, but if all you have up there is cellulose and spray foam, you don't have a mouse issue. Significant damage to the insulation, mostly found in fiberglass and the old Rockwell materials, and cellulose has boracic acid in it and a few other fire retardants that makes it undesirable for critters. That also applies to bats and bugs. You see a lot less of that type of activity in those as well. How many of you guys have run into this crap? Messiest, nastiest stuff to try to clean up or get off your frickin' shirt when you climb out of there?
It seems like almost always there's vermiculite underneath that.
Yep, because it was all that time frame. Yep. And that's a nice precursor to the next floor. And you were saying earlier that you spent some time in Viroqua. Anybody else good down in that neck of the woods? That town, for whatever reason, I bet 85% of the houses I've been in Viroqua are full of vermiculite. We all know what that is, right? You guys all know what that is and what it's capable of?
Libby, Montana.
Libby, Montana. When they test it, do they test for asbestos?
No.
No. They test for consistency with Libby. How much of Libby, Montana was found to contain asbestos? 0.3%.
That much.
0.3%.
So,
But that whole industry got slapped with the label.
an occasion where listing agent took a sample of the vermiculite, sent it somewhere to have it tested for
Yep.
asbestos.
Yep.
So that they would have a test that showed it had no asbestos.
Well, they don't test for asbestos.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yep.
Huh.
Now, there is a Xanolite antitrust lawsuit out there still that will cover 55% of removal and replacement of that product, if it tests consistent with Libby. So if you,
There was a max dollar.
$4,700 or
Yeah.
something.
You gotta pay for everything up front, then you get it back.
Yep,
right?
yep, but again, 55% of removal and replacement.
Right.
So what I found is it'll cover about 90% of removal depending on how much there is. I mean, if it's a 7,000 square foot monstrosity, well, it ain't touching that. I would say most of your removals now are in that $5,000 to $7,000 range on a typical house. Viroqua, I've literally seen a foot of that crap in houses in Viroqua. I don't know what the deal was down there, but
What's the R value on that stuff? Per inch?
like 1.2 or something. It's pointless, but it's what they had. Okay? And in the 1940s and 50s, they loved asbestos. They put that shit everywhere.
What doesn't burn?
Yeah, it also killed everybody who touched it. Cellulose, and now every product again has its place. Cellulose, in my opinion, is the best open attic horizontal surface product out there. Good density, good R value, very little air entrainment, no rodent problems. Do we ever put cellulose below grade? Super absorbent. That stuff will suck water up like nobody's business. Hopefully you guys aren't seeing too much of this crap.
Yeah,
It comes and goes. Comes and goes.
That stuff is right from NASA, it's really good.
Yeah.
I once had a customer's mom was at the inspection and she asked, what do you think of that foil stuff in the attic? I said, well, it was a scam. She goes, oh, we did that in our attic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I got to be in the middle of a husband and wife literal screaming match at one of their house one time because he was super proud of it and she knew it was a scam.
Oh.
And when I confirmed it, he had a bad day.
Broke up marriage.
And here's why. So this is after lifting, here's the foil right here. Pull up the foil, drops water under it. So let me ask you this. Is that a bad product? Or a bad application of a product?
Bad application.
That product is actually designed to go on the bottom of the rafters on the roof deck to keep the heat in the channel so the ventilation can take it out. It's a radiant barrier. The companies that were doing this were just rolling it out in the attic, charging people $3,000 to $4,000 and saying, see you later, enjoy our taillight warranty. And they changed their numbers within like 2 weeks and you never hear from them again. So, glad you guys all know what that's about. So this is wind washing. The lighting on this is weird. So this is what this looked like from the inside. This is looking up at the ceiling, outside wall here. No insulation basically on that outer edge. And this image actually shows, here's your truss. This is bare drywall.
Huh.
The wind got into the soffits, blew the insulation away. Moved the insulation, so now we got a cold spot, bare spot. 1940s and 50s, primarily knee wall cubby attics. You get upstairs, you got the slanted ceilings, walk in behind there and you see that. And they wonder why they have ice damming problems. Here are the two ways you can fix those. I'll start with the one on that side. So the one on the right would be to convert that to a warm storage location, conditioned space. Okay, so they're gonna insulate the roof deck while maintaining an air gap so that we can maintain our venting, so that we're not condensing on our roof surface. The blue is rigid foam board. So we've got a bunch of R value. We've got our air barrier in place, which is the blue board. They're showing a little dot of spray foam sealing these junctions. And then this is a key component that gets missed an awful lot. They seal down to the top of the floor, but they don't do the actual floor cavity itself. What would happen if this was leaking right here? Now all that heat pushes out of the floor system, goes up the venting on the cold side of the insulation, and it's gonna move really fast now because it's a narrow channel, and it's gonna melt that snow twice as fast as it was melting it before. This is a key component to that. You gotta seal that floor off. This one is if those are going to be cold spaces. We're not gonna use them for storage. We're gonna seal them off. We're just gonna let them be attics. Here's the big key component in this one. Conditioned floor, conditioned space, conditioned space. We cannot have that floor system open. Here, this is all conditioned, so we don't care. You gotta create your separation points. The other big one that gets missed in this application a lot, that's an attic, right? Don't we have to vent attics? You have to vent those things. Plan A is we're gonna stop as much as we can possibly stop with air sealing and insulating and all that stuff. Knowing full well, we can't stop 100% of everything ever. Plan B is make sure that whatever does get in there has a place to go. So there you'd probably put a little gable vent on each end, or you could feasibly, if there's room, continue that ventilation up the top.
Do you think the best way to insulate those areas is the dense pack?
The floors, you mean, or the tops?
Yes.
So floors, yes. Tops, depending on thickness. You know, a lot of those 40s houses were only 2x4s. It just doesn't leave you much. So you can dense pack them or you can foam them, and foaming them depends on how long they are. You know, if there's, some of them are only like 2 foot, we can get your foam gun up in there and probably accomplish that. But if they're longer than that, foam is not gonna be a very consistent application in that scenario. If the people are remodeling those spaces, I generally encourage them to fur those down to gain some more space, and then you can do things properly. Any other questions on knee walls? So this is a different kind of wall, still an outside wall, but this is where your vault meets your flat attics. So this is your vertical surface. There's a couple problems with what they did here. They sort of put a couple top plates in, kind of, sort of. There aren't any here. They kind of put them there, but they're way too high. So basically, those walls have no top plate. Has anybody ever pulled a piece of fiberglass apart and how it comes apart in layers? The intent there is to stop things perpendicular to those layers. If those layers are open at the top, as that heat gets into there, it's gonna rise up through those layers and just dump into the attic. So basically what happens here, these should also have been encapsulated, because remember what I said about fiberglass earlier? The only place it ever belongs is in a fully encapsulated cavity with no air entrainment. So not only did this not get back properly, it also didn't get capped properly. So basically that's about a 2.5 sided assembly. So that thing's gonna be a mess. Took this picture at one of my builder's jobs before they finished it. So what he does is he backs them with rigid, and then they come in and they fill them, and then when they do the attics, they spray foam the junctions. So fully encapsulated, fully thermal broke, proper way to do a vault wall. Attic ducting, that one's gonna work really nicely. That attic was probably as warm as the rest of the house. Flex duct sitting above the insulation line. Anybody know what the value of that black stuff is? You know what code is for ducting in attics? R8. So that's what that is. So the heat source that's supposed to be conditioning your rooms only has an R8 on it, but they want the ceiling to have R50. Insulate the damn ducts. Seal them up, insulate them. Oh, this is just open ceiling cavities. You see this a lot around fireplace chases, plumbing chases. This happens to be a duct running through the attic with a plumbing chase in it. Freaking 8-inch by 24-inch hole in the ceiling. It's just a chimney. That's a literal chimney. Open to the attic with some fiberglass. Think that fiberglass has been filtering anything over its life? And then it's a fireplace to boot, so lots of extra heat, so lots of extra movement.
The one I've seen multiple times is when the bathroom is, let's say it's 6.5 feet
Yep.
wide, your tub is 5 foot, so they build that little stubby
Yep.
wall. Well, the inside of that wall doesn't be drywall on the
Yep.
ceiling, so it's just a hole. And
Fireplace
they never-
chases for gas fireplaces,
they never
same thing, just
hole
bigger.
up there.
Yep. This electrician should have his drill taken away. Great bathroom fan vent. Now this picture and the next picture are the same area, just from different angles. When I did this test, I actually brought the homeowner a snowball down. Here you go. Your bath fan's been pumping into your attic.
I had one like that in the soffits where the vent was coming out of the soffit and
Mhm.
just it sucked right back up.
I got one of those too.
I just looked at a condo where first floor bathroom, kitchen exhaust, and basement bathroom were all vented into the attic.
1980s.
I thought, how much work must it have taken to get the basement vent all the way put it into the attic?
The only reason I could see that they would have maybe done that if it was a brick house or a stucco house.
It wasn't. And I was standing in the basement and I'm like, I can look at it right down today. I could run a vent easier than getting to it. Like there's a path right to the outside wall.
Yeah.
Like it took so much more work to get it to the attic.
Yep. North facing gables with massive amounts of water being pushed into that attic. Where does all that water end up when it warms up? On the ceiling of the bedrooms below that, and then they call the roofer to replace the roof. After that 25 below zero spell, I bet you we had 30 calls of people saying they had roof leaks. You know, it was just raining in their attics. Just some really nice applications here. And then, again, you guys have probably seen all this stuff, or variations of this stuff. Don't move the board. Smash the ducting in there. How about a solution like this? So the bath fan is actually right here. You can see just the edge of the collar. So what happens if we get condensation in there? It's a plumbing pipe. It's made for water. As long as you got an outward pitch on that thing, fantastic. Now, I will say the only time where this could be bad is if the power of the fan is in excess of the diameter of the pipe, you can get static electricity in there. So you gotta be careful when you do that. But from a moisture and airflow standpoint, almost zero resistance and already water protected. And it should be insulated. You guys, I just took this picture the other day. You guys ever see these outside? Those round ones? There's a spring in there. I think those springs are rated at like, I think you gotta have 70 CFM of flow capability to compress that spring down. And when you put that connected to a 50 CFM fan and jam it into a 412 pitch soffit, That ain't opening. But let's in theory just say that it did open. Where's that water gonna go? Where's that moisture gonna go? How about right in that soffit vent, and right back into the attic?
I just looked at a brand new build and I talked to the builder and he said, he doesn't like to put them to the roof because then that warm air melts that snow and it
Yep.
causes ice jam up
I
there.
don't disagree.
Oh my God.
I don't disagree at all.
But
Put it on the gable.
I've never been, well, it was a hip roof.
So,
Okay.
So
On new stuff I
I've
see
I've
they-
never been a fan of those because that warm moisture goes up.
Yep.
And 20 years later, you see rotten sheathing.
If that. Go ahead.
a lot of new stuff today, they'll put them on the soffits, but they use non-vented soffit material for about 3 feet.
I knew that's where you're going with that. It's weird because you will not find a code that says that, but you will find some terminology in the code book that says you have to put it in a place where the air can't easily re-enter the attic space. So this is one of those codes that the code inspectors get to interpret however they choose. I like that. And then there's a product out there, and I was gonna throw it in here today and I ran out of time. Panasonic makes what's called the Easy Vent. It's a soffit vent that it has a cover similar to this with no guts inside there. It's basically a cover. But up inside the soffit is a vertical flapper. So all the working mechanisms are up inside the soffit. And then it's a rounded piece of PVC that pushes the air out of the soffit line. So you're still getting a backflow damper, because those are important as well, while still being able to go out the soffit. So that's where not going out the roof, because I agree, you'll create ice damming problems, especially if that thing's on all the frickin' time. And they're now in the industry, they're running moisture sensors and motion sensors and all this stuff, so these fans are running a lot more because the buildings are a lot tighter. And if we get 20 inches of snow up there, you're gonna melt a hell of a lot of snow. So I would encourage to try to keep it off there if you can, but you gotta do it the right way. So now we're kind of coming around to all that humidity in the house, all those humidifiers and vaporizers and all that kind of crap. When you get, oh shit, what did I do? Have any of you guys ever seen an attic like that? Entire roof deck, solid black. There's only one solution to that one. Gotta go. And that turns an insulation project into an awfully expensive project. I'll never forget, probably the third year I was doing this job, I was over off 29 out in Wheaton, and I went in an old ranch, and I opened the attic hatch, and the frickin' mold was literally hanging off the roof deck this far, everywhere. It was like an upside down garden. Just, I shut that frickin' thing so quick I couldn't. Ice damming. We all know what causes that. And I'm gonna touch on a few of those things, but essentially ice dams are heat loss. Here, let me skip to the next one real quick. Heat loss, getting to the roof deck, melting the snow, snow's getting to the edge, and reforming into ice. It is most times a combination of two things. It's a combination of heat loss combined with poor ventilation or some variation of that. I also just took this picture the other day. How many of you guys get into those 1950s, 1960s houses and you see these tile ceilings in there? So when they install those, there's paper face matting in between the joists, and then they run furring strips every 12 inches all the way across the ceiling, and then they basically staple these tile ceilings up here. This is what happens when you put a blower door to them. It might as well not be there. Absolutely dumping heat. So you get two options. You get to either tear all that down and hang drywall up, or spray foam the whole back side of that thing, which your budget's gonna dictate what option you get. So, This is an interesting one that you guys probably will encounter from time to time. Again, I just took this picture on the 27th. I was over Menominee. You can punch in those coordinates if you want. This was a 2-car garage stall, and on the other side of that sheeting is a 3rd stall with the roof line going the opposite direction. No ridge vent on the 3rd stall. Soffit venting, massive ice damming. This sheeting, so there was a ridge vent above this on the 2-car stall. The 3rd stall had no top venting, but it had some intake. So any heat that was happening in that zone was getting caught above the sheeting and had nowhere to go. So it was melting the snow. It just happened to be the stall the guy parked his truck in every night. There was no insulation on the ceiling deck, but the engine heat off his truck was enough heat to heat that space to get that cavity warmed up and start melting roof snow, which created a massive ice dam in an unheated space, which is pretty non-typical. What they need to do is cut some freaking holes in that thing and allow those 2 attics to communicate. And I see this a lot, where ranch houses, they build the house first, they attach the garage on next, and they leave all the sheeting in the way. Those roofs have to act as one, they have to communicate. So as high up in those things as you can get, they gotta cut some holes to allow that heat to dissipate in and out of there, because every roofer you talk to will say, oh, if the garage roof is this high, but the house roof is this high, I can't put ridge vent on there because it'll become an intake. I don't disagree with that, but let's cut some holes so that all the heat that gets stuck in here can actually get out. But with all that sheeting in the way, it just creates this hot pocket all the way along there, and it can't go anywhere. Look at that, he made it through 106 slides. Any other things you guys have encountered that you want to ask me about, or anything else?